The engine turned over once, twice, then died with a sick wheeze that made my stomach drop. I tried again, pumping the accelerator, willing the Toyota to catch. Nothing, just the endless silence of red dirt and spinifex stretching in every direction. It's not starting. My voice sounded small in the vastness. 12 hours we'd been stuck here, wheels spinning uselessly in the sand that had looked so innocent when we'd driven off the track to camp. Now the sand felt like a trap, and panic was rising in my chest like floodwater. Claire leaned forward from the back seat. Try it again. I turned the key. The starter motor whined, then clicked. Dead. We're in the middle of nowhere, Lisa whispered, staring out at the desert that rolled away in every direction. No roads. No buildings. No people. Just endless red earth under a sky so blue it made your eyes water. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone. No signal. I held it up, watching the screen desperately, moving it left and right like that might somehow conjure bars out of thin air. Still nothing. Mine's the same, Claire said, checking her phone. Nothing. We sat in silence, the weight of our situation settling over us like dust. 3 of us, hundreds of kilometers from anything resembling civilization, with a dead car and no way to call for help. The silence pressed against my eardrums. Out here you could hear your own heartbeat. Lisa was the first to get out, walking around the Toyota with her hands on her hips. We can dig it out. We just need to clear the sand from the wheels. I wanted to believe her. We'd been mates for years, had planned this trip as an adventure, a chance to see the real Australia. Now I wondered how we'd been so bloody stupid, driving off into the desert with nothing but a few bottles of water and some snacks. Claire joined Lisa outside, kicking at the sand that had built up around the tires. It doesn't look too bad, we can do this, but I could see how deep we were sunk. The sand had packed hard around the wheels overnight, cement solid now. We had nothing to dig with except our hands and a rusty tire iron from the boot. I climbed out into the heat. Even at 10 in the morning, the sun felt like a weight on my shoulders. The air shimmered above the bonnet, heat waves dancing like ghosts. By midday, it would be unbearable. How much water do we have? I asked. We counted together, 6 bottles of water between us. Maybe 4 liters total. In this heat, with physical work ahead of us, that wouldn't last long. My mouth was already dry just thinking about it. The main road can't be more than 20 kilometers back, Claire said, but her voice lacked conviction. We'd turned off the main track hours ago, following what looked like a vehicle trail that had petered out into nothing. I couldn't even remember which direction we'd come from anymore. The landscape all looked identical from ground level. Red dirt, scattered rocks, scrubby bushes that offered no shade. Lisa was already digging, scooping handfuls of sand away from the front wheel. Come on, we can't just stand here. The sand burned against her palms. She winced but kept going, flinging handfuls away from the tire. We worked in turns, the sand scorching our hands, the sun climbing higher. Every few minutes, we'd try the engine again, rocking the car back and forth. The wheels just spun deeper into the soft ground, whining uselessly. Sand sprayed out behind us in useless arcs. By noon, we were exhausted and barely halfway done. The heat was savage now, pressing down on us like something alive. It had weight and presence, a physical thing that made breathing difficult. We retreated to the shade of the car, sharing sips of warm water and trying not to think about how little we had left. The water tasted of plastic and desperation. Someone will come looking for us, Claire said. When we don't show up in Alice Springs tomorrow, they'll send people out. But who would come looking? I thought about my ex-wife, who barely returned my calls, my sister in Perth, who didn't even know exactly where we'd gone. We'd been vague about our plans, talking about exploring the desert, maybe camping under the stars. Nobody knew our route, or when to expect us back. The afternoon stretched endlessly. We kept digging, but the sand seemed to flow back as fast as we cleared it. My fingernails were broken and bloody. Claire's hands were raw, blisters forming on her palms. By evening we were no closer to freedom, and the water was running low. 2 bottles left between 3 people. As the sun set, the temperature dropped fast. I'd forgotten how cold the desert got at night. One moment you're cooking alive, the next you're shivering. We huddled together in the car, sharing a single blanket, listening to the strange sounds of the night, dingoes howling in the distance, voices like lost souls. The crack and tick of cooling metal, the wind moving through the spinifex grass like whispers. "We need to ration the water," I said. "Make it last." Lisa nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes now. We all felt it. The desert was bigger than we were, indifferent to our survival. It would take us and leave nothing but our remains in the sand, and no one would ever know what happened. Claire was crying quietly. "I should have told David exactly where we were going. I should have left a map." "We all should have done things differently," I said, "but regret wasn't going to get us out of here." I lay awake most of the night, staring up through the windscreen at stars so bright and numerous, they seemed to press down on me. The desert was beautiful and terrible, and it didn't care if we lived or died. The second day was worse. We tried digging again, but our hands were raw and our strength was fading. The blisters on Claire's palms had burst, weeping clear fluid. Lisa's fingertips were cracked and bleeding. The water was going faster than planned. It was impossible not to drink when your throat felt like sandpaper and the heat was cooking you alive. Every sip we took was a sip closer to nothing. By the 3rd morning I knew we were in serious trouble. We had maybe a day's worth of water left, and the car wasn't budging. Sitting here waiting for rescue that might never come wasn't an option anymore. "I'm going to walk out," I announced. The words surprised me as much as them. "Mate, no." Claire grabbed my arm. "We should stay together. Stay with the car. That's what they always say. Stay with your vehicle. The car's not going anywhere, and nobody's coming down this track." I pulled away, surprised by my own decisiveness. "I'll follow our tire marks back to the main road. Get help." Lisa looked terrified. "What if you get lost?" "I'm already lost." I started gathering what little I could carry. 1 precious bottle of water, some crackers, my hat. The hat was a cheap tourist thing I'd bought in Cuba Petty, but it was better than nothing. My heart was hammering, but I felt strangely calm too. Making a decision, even a dangerous one, felt better than sitting here slowly dying of thirst. Claire was crying again. "Please don't leave us." "I'm not leaving you. I'm getting help." I hugged them both, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Claire was trembling. Lisa gripped my shoulders like she was drowning. "I'll be back with a rescue team. 2 days, maximum." I started walking before I could change my mind, following the faint tire tracks that marked our path into this place. The sun was already hot, and it wasn't even 8 o'clock. The tracks were harder to see than I'd expected, sometimes disappearing entirely over rocky ground or in patches where the wind had shifted the sand. After an hour I looked back. The car was a tiny speck behind me. Claire and Lisa were standing beside it, watching me go. Claire raised her hand in a small wave. I waved back, then turned away and kept walking. The desert opened up around me, vast and empty and utterly indifferent. Red dirt and sparse vegetation stretched to the horizon in every direction. No roads, no power lines, no signs that humans had ever existed. My feet were already starting to hurt in my sneakers, not proper hiking boots, just casual shoes meant for walking around town. Everything about this trip had been casual, unplanned, stupid. We'd driven into one of the most dangerous environments on Earth with no preparation and no backup plan. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford now. I had water for maybe 6 hours of walking in this heat. I had to make those hours count. The tire tracks curved and wound. sometimes doubling back on themselves where we'd gotten confused the day before. I tried to take the most direct route, but without the tracks to follow I was just guessing. The landscape all looked the same: red dirt, scattered rocks, scrubby bushes that offered no shade. The sun climbed higher. The heat pressed against my back like a furnace door opening. By midday I had to stop. The heat was crushing, and my water was half gone already. I'd been sipping it every few minutes, unable to help myself. I found a small patch of shade beside a rock outcrop and sat down, trying not to think about Claire and Lisa back at the car. Were they managing to dig it out? Had they found more water somewhere, or were they already starting to panic, realizing their mate might never make it back? I allowed myself 3 small sips of water, then capped the bottle and kept walking. The sun was like a hammer on my head, and every step sent jolts of pain through my feet. The sneakers weren't meant for this terrain. I could feel blisters forming, hot spots that would soon become agony, but there was nothing to do except keep moving. The tracks were getting harder to follow. In some places the wind had erased them entirely. In others, they seemed to split and go in different directions. I realized with growing horror that I might have taken a wrong turn somewhere, might be walking away from the road instead of toward it. But I couldn't go back now. I didn't have enough water for a return trip. My only choice was to keep moving forward and hope I was going the right way. The afternoon sun was merciless. It felt like it was cooking my brain inside my skull. I stumbled more often now, my legs shaking with exhaustion and dehydration. The water was almost gone, and I hadn't seen anything that looked like a road or a track used by other vehicles. As the sun began to set on my first day of walking, I faced a terrible truth. I was lost. Completely, utterly lost in hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of empty desert. And I had less than half a bottle of water left. The second day of walking was worse than the first. My lips were cracked and bleeding, and my tongue felt like sandpaper in my mouth. I'd finished the water just after sunrise, and now every step was agony. My feet were raw with blisters, and the sneakers were falling apart. The sole had separated from the upper on my right shoe, flapping with each step. I kept following what I hoped were tire tracks, but they kept disappearing and reappearing in ways that made no sense. Sometimes, I'd find deep ruts that looked fresh. Other times just faint impressions that could have been anything: animal tracks, shadows, figments of my desperate imagination. The doubt was eating at me almost as much as the thirst. By noon I was stumbling every few steps. The world seemed to shimmer and dance around me, and I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was that a tree ahead, or just another rock? Was that the sound of a car engine, or just wind through the scrub? I thought about Claire and Lisa constantly. Had they managed to dig out the car? Were they driving around looking for me right now? Or were they still sitting in that patch of shade, getting weaker and weaker, wondering why I hadn't come back? The guilt was almost unbearable. I should have stayed with them. We should have all walked together from the beginning, or all stayed with the car. Now, I'd probably doomed all 3 of us with my stupid decision to go for help. The sun was brutal. It felt like it was burning right through my skull. I'd wrapped my t-shirt around my head, but that left my arms and shoulders exposed to the heat. Every inch of exposed skin was red and blistered. I found a small bush and crawled under it for shade, but even in the shadows the heat was crushing. I lay there panting like a dog, trying not to think about water. Cold water. Ice water. The sound of it pouring into a glass. Stop it, I told myself. That way leads to madness. But the images kept coming. The swimming pool at my local gym. The shower in my bathroom. The drinking fountain at the shopping center, where I'd never given a second thought to taking a long, cool drink. I forced myself to get up and keep walking. Every step was torture now, but stopping meant dying. I knew that with absolute certainty. The third day was when I started seeing things that weren't there. A house on the horizon that turned out to be a boulder. A person waving at me, who was actually a dead tree. A road that looked perfectly real until I got close enough to see it was just a dried creek bed. My systems were shutting down. I could feel it happening, one function failing after another. My skin was gray and papery. My heartbeat was fast and irregular. Sometimes I'd stop walking and forget why I'd stopped, standing there swaying in the heat until some deep survival instinct kicked me forward again. I thought I was still following tire tracks, but I couldn't be sure anymore. Everything looked the same: red dirt, rocks, bushes, an endless sameness that made me want to scream. But screaming would waste moisture I didn't have. I fell down a lot now, just collapsed face first into the dirt, and lay there until I could find the strength to get up again. Each time it was harder. Each time I wondered if this would be the last time. On the fourth day of walking, I stopped seeing the tire tracks altogether. Or maybe they'd never been there. Maybe I'd been following animal tracks or shadows, or nothing at all. I was talking to myself now, carrying on conversations with people who weren't there. My mum, my sister, Claire and Lisa. Sometimes I'd argue with them, getting angry about things that had happened years ago. "I told you we should have brought more water," I said to Claire, who wasn't there. "But you said it was just a day trip, just a quick look around." The sound of my own voice scared me. It was thick and slurred, barely recognizable. By the fifth day, I wasn't sure I was walking anymore. I seemed to be floating above the ground, watching myself stumble forward. My limbs felt disconnected from my mind, like I was operating a broken machine from a great distance. I kept checking my pockets for water bottles that weren't there, my brain refusing to accept that they were empty. Several times I found myself trying to drink from bottles that contained nothing but hot air and the smell of old plastic. The hallucinations were getting worse. I saw entire cities on the horizon, complete with skyscrapers and traffic lights. I saw lakes of cool, clear water that I ran toward before they vanished into more red dirt and rocks. Once I was convinced I saw a McDonald's and spent an hour walking toward it, planning what I'd order. A large Coke with extra ice, maybe 2 large Cokes. When I finally reached the spot, there was nothing but a rusty piece of metal half buried in the sand. I cried then, but no tears came. My form had no moisture left for tears. The worst part was the uncertainty about Claire and Lisa. In my more lucid moments, I knew they were probably dead by now. 4 days with no water in this heat? It was impossible, but I kept walking anyway, because what else was there to do? Sometimes I imagined they were walking behind me, just out of sight. I'd turn around expecting to see them, but there was never anyone there, just my own footprints in the sand, weaving back and forth like a drunk person's. On the 6th day I started forgetting things. Important things. I couldn't remember my sister's name. I couldn't remember what city I lived in. Sometimes, I couldn't remember why I was walking, just that I had to keep moving forward. My feet were destroyed now. The sneakers had completely fallen apart, and I was basically walking barefoot on rocks and thorns. But the pain was distant, like it was happening to someone else. I fell more often, and each time it took longer to get up. My limbs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Everything was so much effort. Just breathing was effort. But I kept going because stopping meant dying, and some primitive part of my brain wasn't ready to die yet. On the 7th day, something changed. The world started spinning, slowly at first, then faster and faster until I couldn't stay upright anymore. I fell to my knees, then onto my side, and the spinning didn't stop. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't work. They felt like rubber, completely disconnected from the rest of my form. I managed to crawl a few meters before collapsing again. This is it, I thought. This is where I die. The realization was almost peaceful. I'd fought so hard, walked so far, but my strength was finally giving up. I lay on my side in the red dirt, watching the world spin around me, and waited for the end. But it didn't come quickly. I lay there for hours, drifting in and out of consciousness. Sometimes I thought I was back home in my own bed. Sometimes I thought I was a child again, playing in my parents' backyard. Sometimes I didn't know who or where I was at all. The sun moved across the sky, but I couldn't move with it. I was stuck in one spot now, completely helpless. My skin was burning, but I couldn't do anything about it. I kept thinking about water. It became an obsession, the only thing my mind could focus on. Water running from a tap, water in a swimming pool, rain falling on my face. I would have given anything, done anything, for just one drop of clean, cold water. Night came, and the temperature dropped, but I barely noticed. I was too far gone for comfort or discomfort to matter anymore. I dreamed about Claire and Lisa. In the dream, we were all back at home, laughing about our adventure in the desert. "Remember when we got stuck?" Claire was saying. "Remember how scared we were? We were drinking iced tea and eating sandwiches, and everything was normal and safe. When I woke up, I was alone in the sand again. The 8th day was when I started digging. I couldn't walk anymore, could barely crawl. But some deep instinct told me I needed shelter from the sun, and the only shelter available was what I could make myself. Using my hands and a sharp rock, I started scraping out a shallow depression in the sand. It was pathetic work. I could only manage a few scrapes before I had to rest, gasping in the thin morning air. My hands were raw and bleeding, fingernails torn down to the quick. But I kept at it. Scrape, rest, scrape, rest. The hole got deeper, inch by painful inch. Each scrape of sand felt like moving a mountain. My hands were beyond pain now, existing in some strange state between life and death, where nothing really mattered except the next scrape of sand, the next tiny improvement to my shelter. It took me most of the day to dig a hole barely big enough for my form. When I finally crawled inside, it offered maybe a degree or two of relief from the heat. Not much, but it was something. I lay in my pathetic shelter and tried not to think about anything. Not about water, not about Claire and Lisa, not about home. Thinking hurt too much now. But my mind wouldn't cooperate. It kept showing me images of everything I'd lost. My sister's wedding, where I was supposed to be the best man. The job I'd never get to quit properly. The books I'd never get to read. Such stupid, ordinary things. But they felt infinitely precious now that I was losing them. I found myself making deals with God, or the universe, or whoever might be listening. Let me live, and I'll never complain about anything again. Let me see my family one more time, and I'll be grateful for every boring, ordinary day. But the desert didn't care about my deals. The sun kept burning, the sand kept shifting into my shelter, and my systems kept shutting down one by one. On the 9th day, I couldn't get out of my hole anymore. The effort was too much. I lay there listening to my heartbeat, which seemed to be getting slower and more irregular by the hour. I started seeing people I'd known who had died. My grandmother, who'd passed away when I was 12. A mate from school who'd died in a car accident. They stood at the edge of my vision, just out of focus, waiting patiently. "Not yet," I whispered to them, though I wasn't sure why. What was I waiting for? But some stubborn part of me refused to give up. Even when my form had nothing left, even when my mind was mostly gone, something deep inside kept fighting. I rationed my movements like I'd once rationed water, a shift to get more comfortable cost energy I couldn't spare. Brushing sand off my face was a major decision. I thought about all the survival shows I'd watched on TV, where experts made it look so easy. They always found water, or built amazing shelters, or signaled for rescue. None of them had mentioned this slow, grinding dissolution of everything that made you human. On the 10th day, I heard the helicopter. At first, I thought it was another hallucination. I'd been hearing all kinds of sounds that weren't there. Cars, voices, music. But this was different, deeper, more mechanical. I forced my eyes open and saw it in the distance, a dark speck against the blue sky. My heart jumped, and for a moment I felt more alert than I had in days. I tried to wave, but my arms wouldn't move properly. I tried to shout, but no sound came out. I could only lie there in my pathetic hole, watching the helicopter get closer. It was real, It was definitely real. Someone was looking for us. The helicopter circled the area, maybe half a kilometer away. I could see it clearly now, could hear the distinctive whoop-whoop of the rotors. Rescue was so close I could almost taste it. I managed to raise one arm a few inches off the ground. It was the best I could do. My makeshift shelter was probably invisible from the air. Just another patch of disturbed sand in an endless landscape of disturbed sand. The helicopter made another pass, closer this time. I held my breath, willing them to see me. Look down, I thought. Please look down. But they didn't. The helicopter completed its circle and flew away, the sound of its engines fading until there was nothing but silence again. I lay in my hole and felt something break inside me. Not my form, that had been broken for days. Something deeper. The last shred of hope I'd been carrying. They'd been so close. So impossibly close. And they'd missed me. I closed my eyes and tried to let go. I'd fought as hard as I could. No one could say I hadn't tried. But there was nothing left now. No strength, no hope, no reason to keep fighting. The desert had won. I woke to the sound again. For a moment I thought I was dreaming, or that my mind had finally snapped completely. The helicopter noise was back, that same deep mechanical thrumming that had crushed my hope the day before. I kept my eyes closed, not willing to go through it again. Better to just lie here and wait for death, than watch another rescue fly away, but the sound was getting louder. And it wasn't moving away. I forced my eyes open and saw it directly overhead, much lower than before. The pilot was circling tight, focused on something. On my area. On me. This time I didn't try to wave or shout. I just watched, barely daring to breathe. The helicopter made another pass, even lower, and I could see the pilot's helmet in the cockpit window. He was looking down, scanning the ground methodically. The aircraft settled into a hover about 100 meters away, and I saw someone lean out of the side door with binoculars. They were searching every patch of sand, every bush, every shadow. Please, I thought. It was the only prayer I had left. The helicopter moved closer, and suddenly I saw the person with the binoculars point directly at me. Even from this distance, I could see the excitement in their gestures. They'd found me. The relief hit me like a physical blow. 12 days of fighting and hoping and dying, and finally, someone had seen me. I tried to sit up and managed to get my head and shoulders out of the hole I'd dug. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make myself visible. The helicopter was landing now, kicking up clouds of red dust. I watched the rotor wash tear at the scrub around me and felt the sting of sand against my face. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. Two figures jumped out before the skids had fully touched down. Paramedics in bright uniforms, moving fast across the desert toward me. I wanted to call out to them, to wave, to do something, but my limbs still wouldn't cooperate. I just lay there and watched them run to me, and that was enough. The first one reached my shelter and dropped to his knees beside me. He was young, with kind eyes behind safety glasses, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but urgent. "Tom, can you hear me? We're here to help. You're going to be okay." I tried to nod and managed a tiny movement of my head. When I opened my mouth to speak, only a whisper came out. "Claire, Lisa, the car." "We know," the paramedic said, already checking my pulse and temperature. "We found them yesterday. They're alive. They're in the hospital, but they're alive." The words hit me like cool water. Alive. Both of them alive. I'd carried their faces with me through every step of this nightmare, convinced I'd never see them again. The guilt of leaving them had been almost as hard to bear as the thirst. The second paramedic arrived with medical equipment and a stretcher. They worked quickly, checking my vital signs, starting an IV, wrapping me in blankets. I felt like a broken doll in their hands, but I'd never been more grateful to feel broken. Broken meant I was still here. Broken meant I could heal. "How long since you had water?" the first paramedic asked. I had to think about it. Time had become meaningless out here. 2 days, maybe 3. They exchanged glances over my head. I could see the concern in their faces, but also relief. I was dehydrated and exhausted and probably had heat stroke, but I was conscious and talking. I was going to make it. They lifted me onto the stretcher with careful efficiency. As they carried me toward the helicopter, I got my first clear look at the shelter I'd dug with my bare hands. It was pathetic, just a shallow depression in the sand with a few rocks piled around the edge. I couldn't believe I'd survived in something so crude, but I had survived. Against all odds, against the desert's best efforts to kill me, against my own despair, I'd made it through 12 days of hell. The helicopter ride to the hospital passed in a blur of medical attention and radio chatter. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my form finally allowing itself to shut down now that rescue had come. Through the windows I could see the desert falling away below us, red and vast and merciless. It looked different from the air, smaller somehow, less overwhelming. Just rocks and sand and stubborn plants, not the death trap it had seemed when I was walking through it, but I knew better now. I'd seen what it could do to the human form and spirit. I'd felt its power firsthand. At the hospital, everything happened fast. More doctors and nurses, more tests and treatments, more questions I was too tired to answer properly. They put me in a room with air conditioning and clean sheets and water whenever I wanted it. Simple things that felt like miracles after what I'd been through. Claire and Lisa came to see me the next day. They looked terrible, sunburned and gaunt and hollow-eyed, but they were walking and talking and alive. When Claire hugged me, both of us started crying. We'd all made it. Somehow, impossibly, we'd all survived. "I thought you were dead," Lisa said, still holding my hand. "When you didn't come back, we thought the desert got you." "I thought you were dead too," I admitted. "Every day I was out there, I wondered if I'd made the right choice leaving you." "You did," Claire said firmly. "If you hadn't walked out to find help, they might never have found us. The search team said they were following your trail when they spotted our car." It took weeks before I felt human again. The physical recovery was hard enough. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, infected cuts and blisters that took forever to heal. But the mental part was harder. I had nightmares about endless red dirt and empty skies. I woke up checking for water bottles that weren't there. I couldn't look at sand without feeling a flutter of panic. The media wanted to interview me, to hear about my survival story and what I'd learned from the experience. For a while I tried to avoid them, not ready to relive those 12 days for strangers, but eventually I realized I had something important to say. The Outback wasn't a theme park or a backdrop for adventure selfies. It was a living thing with its own rules and its own power. It could kill you in dozens of different ways, and it wouldn't care about your plans or your timeline or your confidence in modern technology. I'd learned that lesson the hardest way possible. But I'd also learned something else, something that surprised me more than surviving had. The human form and spirit could endure incredible punishment and still keep fighting. I'd reached points where I was sure I was finished, where giving up seemed like the only rational choice, and somehow I'd kept going anyway. Not because I was particularly brave or strong or prepared. I wasn't any of those things. I kept going because something deep inside refused to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. Some stubborn animal part of my brain that didn't understand concepts like hopelessness or surrender. Everyone had that same core of determination, I believed now. Most people just never had to find it. When I finally gave my first interview, 6 months after the rescue, the reporter asked me what advice I had for other people planning Outback trips. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "Respect it," I said simply. "The desert, the bush, all of it. Don't go out there thinking you can beat it or conquer it or Instagram your way through it. It's bigger than you are, and it's been killing overconfident people for thousands of years. Take proper equipment. Tell people where you're going. Have backup plans for your backup plans." I paused, remembering the feeling of sand in my mouth and the weight of empty sky above me. "But if something does go wrong, if you end up like we did, don't give up. Even when it seems impossible, even when you're sure you're going to die, Keep fighting. You're stronger than you think you are. We all are. I never would have believed I could survive 12 days out there, but I did, and if I can do it, anybody can. The desert had taken almost everything from me during those 12 days. My strength, my hope, my naive confidence in my own invincibility. But it had also given me something back, a knowledge of what I was truly capable of when everything else was stripped away. I wouldn't recommend the experience to anyone. But I couldn't say I regretted it either. The Outback was still out there, red and vast and dangerous. It always would be. And people would keep underestimating it, keep wandering into it unprepared, keep learning its lessons the hard way. I just hoped some of them would listen to my story and choose an easier path to wisdom. The desert was a powerful teacher, but its classes came with a price most people couldn't afford to pay. I'd been lucky enough to survive my education. Not everyone would be. If you've ever driven the long road at night, you know the silence. Hit like and subscribe. More stories are coming.